My name is Ugo Chukwu. I'm from Nigeria, and I I grew up in Imo State, the eastern part of Nigeria, and basically growing up as a child, I've always looked out around me, and I saw this despicable level of poverty and penury that saturated my environment, and it was something that I couldn't quite relate because.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
As I read books, watched the television, so I saw a different reality out there, and I began to ask myself, what is it that these people have that we don't actually have? What is it that has shaped these other people's lives? And that is quite different from what we have. So that drove me to deep research. That drove me to, asking very personal questions about myself, about my environment, and about my world. And I started studying, started researching, and I became very curious. So my journey, my intellectual journey, actually drove me to personal development. And personal development, I took it very seriously because I realized that, of all things, that it is the most important. It was actually the pathway that I was going to salvage myself, and extension those around me, from the terrible situation that we found ourselves. So personal development became my tool of rewiring my mind, rewiring my personality, and changing not only myself, but the people around me. So this journey of personal development have consciously, I would say I started from the time I became conscious of my environment, because it is said that if you are born poor, it's not your fault. But the day you realize that you're poor, or that the things are not going right, then it becomes your fault. So awareness essentially brings responsibility. It confers responsibility. So immediately I realized that, I became responsible for changing not only myself, but also my environment and also the people around me. So my journey of personal development has specifically I've been a journey of over 10 years, where I've tried to actually change my mind the very deep level at a very deep level, to actually change who I am, my personality, my perception of the world. And in that process, I've literally questioned everything, from my identity, to my religion, to everything that I have been handed over to. And I began to understand something, that until you get to the point where you question the script that was written for you, you don't get to live an authentic life. Because growing up as a child, as an adult, to the point that you are an adult, there is an unwritten script that actually runs your life. And this script is divided into two. The first script is the genetic script, which is basically the ancestral memory that is encoded in your DNA. And the second script is the societal script, one that is written by culture, the cultural script. And this is what you're taught. Growing up, you're brought up, and you learn the norms and the etiquettes and the beliefs and the ideologies of your country, of your society, and of your culture. So this becomes the script that's literally run your life as you go up. So the only way that progress goes forward is that people, when you get to an adult stage, when you become conscious and aware, you sit down to actually question those scripts. Not because you have a negative agenda, but because you want to understand, you want to live life at your own terms. So that was what I did, growing up. So That led me into, of course, studying philosophy. I have a background in philosophy. But as my philosophy, when I finished studying philosophy, I came to understand that at the very core of what makes us who we are is not only the memories that form the ancestral memories that determine the genetic blueprints that we have, but also the very structure of our bodies and our brain. So that drove me into neurobiology. I started studying neuroscience and neurobiology just to understand how the mind and the body actually works. So in my course of personal development, I come to the point because I had understood how, to a large extent, a fairly bit of how our mind works, and how our body works, and how the society influences the way we think, the way we act, the way we behave. But one thing was still missing, and that was the question of money. Of course, you need money to run your life. So, and the place I'm coming from is lacking. And we had crunching poverty, the part of Nigeria that I'm coming from. And a lot of people are still suffering from that. So I took a year to enter into a mentorship program where I had to study under a mentor wealth education, because I had to study the concept of wealth in and of itself to understand the principles that underlie the very act of creating wealth as a science and as an art. So it's something that's, in the course of studying it, I understood that wealth is not something that's, people usually think that, you grow up, you're born, you go to school, and then you come out, you look for a job, and then you make money and all of that. School has its own purpose and what it serves. But the act of creating wealth itself is not something that you stumble upon. It's something that you create intentionally. So the art of wealth creation is actually an intentional process. You can stumble on money, you can make $50 million, you can win lottery, you can make little money from here and there. Somebody can dash you, can gift you money or anything. But the art of wealth creation, and by that I mean a wealth that goes beyond the individual to the society, and at a very large scale to the society. It's not what you do unintentionally. It's an intentional process. And that wealth is not created as an individual, it's created as a community. It's not an individual that creates wealth. You can become rich as an individual, but you create wealth as a community, as a people. So this now led me to the very question of the African identity, Africans, and why we are so behind, why we are so backward when it comes to civilization. You check almost the whole human race, the different races, and you find that it is only the African that struggles. It is only the African that has continually struggled to manifest their full identity in the world, to make a statement about who they are and what they can create and give to the world. And that is because we as Africans, we've suffered a very terrible history, growing up and getting to the points that we are today. And our identity has really been hit hard by a lot of forces. It is only the African that has had the developmental process truncated. Every other race had had to develop through the natural process, and in the process hone their identity in order to manifest who they are and get to the level of civilization in their own terms. And so if you go down, and this was a study that I did, going down, observing, you understand that every life form, every species, we continue to progress. We continue to develop at its own progress, at its own pace. And until it gets to the peak of its civilization, to the point that it actually manifests its real identity. it will continue to progress to that stage unless its developmental process is truncated, unless it is truncated. And so I found out that for the Europeans, their developmental process was almost pristine because they had to go through a process that allowed them to go from stage to stage, just like you have a butterfly going from this very young age of going from larva to pupa to caterpillar to the point that it becomes really advanced and gets to full maturity. But with Africans, ours was quite different. The Europeans, they went through that process, but ours was truncated. And because of that truncation that happened, which happened with colonialism, we suffered an identity crisis. It's that identity crisis that has continued to affect us, that has continued to truncate our process, that has prevented us from getting to the level of racial self-actualization. The racial self-actualization, the point at which we attain the highest level of our civilization. After understanding this, and where I realized that this was a problem, so I made it my mission to begin the process of helping the Africans re-author their identities. Because I realized that for you to actually succeed at anything at all, for you to become successful at anything at all, you need to be able to understand yourself. You have to understand yourself first, because it's from a clear understanding, a clear perception of who you are and what you are here to do, that you can begin to chart the course for yourself, that you can begin to create wealth, that you can begin to make your mark, talk more of leaving legacy behind. So I made it, and I found out that at the very core level of the problems that we have as Africans, that at its core was the question of identity, which affected us, an identity crisis, which has continued to affect us. So this is what my work is all about, at least from the perspective of the Africans that I'm interfacing, that I'm interacting with. So my work as a coach is actually focused on helping people achieve their human needs by first of all addressing the basic issues of life. So your human needs could be at any level. It could be a financial need. It could be a security need. It could be, let's say, you want to have employment, you want to make sure that your life is secure. It could be an emotional problem. It could be a relationship problem. It could be a question of self-actualization. You don't really understand yourself or what you're doing in this world or what your life is all about. It could be that you're struggling in your career. It could be that you want to make headway in your finances. It could be that you're struggling as an entrepreneur. But all of these questions, all of these problems are hinged under basic core human needs. They are hinged under basic core human needs. And if you can understand the forces that are actually controlling those needs that you have, because every human need that you have, at its core, that need is a problem of actually interfacing with reality. Because if you have a need for food or hunger, or let's make it on a broader term, if you have an economic need, the problem that you're witnessing, it's a friction between how the forces of economics, the forces of demand and supply, it's the forces of how to make ends meet, how to manage and how to create and manage resources. So it causes a friction for you. So that need is as a result of the friction of how the world works in that aspect of life. For I realized that in the course of my study, and in the course of my work and the interactions I've had with a lot of people, that for you to actually solve any friction that you're witnessing, with your interaction with the world, that you have to be able to do two things. You have to be able to think clearly about the issue in question. And the clarity of thinking allows you to actually process the information that is involved, to decode the friction that you're witnessing, and to actually solve it. That's where the problem of that's where the clarity of thinking actually comes in. And then the second is for you to actually learn how to become the kind of a person that can actually solve that problem, that can actually solve that friction. So my work is my approach of helping people to arrive at this point of authentic living through an understanding of the self, and then going forward is to be able to think clearly and to learn how to learn. And so I'm an author of 4 books. I've published 4 books, and 3 of my books actually focuses on these issues. My first book, An Exercise in Clear Thinking, addresses the question of clear thinking and how you can develop the mental frameworks that will allow you to process information accurately and fast, and pretty much fast enough for you to process information about the world. And the second, which is a book that I actually wrote for students, Infinite Learning, actually focuses on how you can learn how to learn. That is acquiring the ability to become the kind of a person that will achieve the kind of results that you want in your life. So that's what the second book focuses on, Infinite Learning. And then my third book, which I published last month, is about the journey to 1%. It's about developing the cognitive skills that will allow you to go from 0 to the top 1% of your career. And so this is actually an extension of the first 2 books, bringing it in a more practical sense, what you need to do to become who you want to be and to actualize your self-potential. Not only to just become successful at what you do, but to become the top 1% in that thing that you're doing. And I believe that if you are able to think clearly and then learn how to learn, that you will sufficiently upgrade your intelligence to the point that you can get to the level that you will become really successful at whatever you do.
I want us to go back a little bit. This identity crisis that a lot of Africans suffered from. Of course, you made mention of colonialism, and of course, there is also slavery. Basically, the encounter with Europe have a lot of effort with it. Okay, now let's go beyond that. Before we encounter European, who brought us this bad luck, who conquered us and therefore turned us into POW, and they use us the way they want because we are not be able to rise from that dust. How was our identity? What can you say regarding our identity as a people?
Okay, that's an interesting question. To understand the nature of the African identity prior to the Europeans, of course, you're gonna have to go back to history and to go back to archaeological records, because that is, yes, it's true that majority of what we have with history have been lost, and mostly what we have today, the things that even some Europeans had to document. But let's do a sampling of the archaeological records from what we have, from a few, archaeological records and historical trappings. So you look at the likes of Egypt. You look at the likes of the guy from Mali. What's his name? Mansa
Musa.
Yes, Mansa Musa. So majority of the civilizations, if you look at majority of the African, they were in pre-colonial era. Majority of African nations, we had only few empires. We had the empire that was run by Mansa Musa. We had also kingdoms like the Egyptian dynasty, empires like that. So those were the major empires. And if you look at how societies function, how societies are structured, you find out that there were empires, there are kingdoms, there are chiefdoms, and then before you get to the level of tribes, tribal and then ethnic level of groups. So you find out that these were the different levels, cadres of organization. So an empire is much larger. It covers a huge expanse of land and, of course, many population and all of that. And then you also look at kingdoms. Kingdoms are much larger than chiefdoms. And then chiefdoms are much larger, of course, than tribes. And then tribes, before you get down to the very basic level of groups, and then all of that. So if you look at those civilizations, you will find out that history, archaeological records actually show us that these people were well advanced in their civilization, at least by judging from what was obtainable at the time. They were way advanced in their civilization, and they were progressing at a rate that was stable, based on their civilization. So you look at the illustrious work. Of course, look at the works, the Egyptian pyramids and the archaeological splendor that has been discovered from what the Egyptians left behind. And if you come then even to the very local levels and even the tribal levels of here in Nigeria, let's say the Duduwa Kingdom and all of those dynasties and kingdoms, you find out that there's been a lot of documentation of an advanced and intelligent civilization. So now, the question now becomes, some people will ask, yeah, but why was it that these people did not advance to become, really advanced like the Europeans and developed the capacity to be able to wage the war against the Europeans and not allow the Europeans to dominate them? That the very fact that the Europeans dominated the Africans means that Africans are quite lower and we had a less sophisticated civilization. But that is not the question, because if you take time to study the history, evolutionary archaeology, and the history of the Africans, and actually the history of the world, human race, how we have actually progressed, then you find out that if we had been left on our own, two things would have happened. Either we went into extinction because we are not able to develop an intelligent civilization, intelligent enough for us to keep surviving, or we would advance to the level that will get an advanced civilization that will make us successful and prosperous. Now, in hindsight, we cannot know that in cold facts because the developmental process was truncated. What we know is that the Egyptians were so advanced in their civilization that the likes of Socrates and Thales and even most Asian philosophers, even Augustine and many of them, had to travel from their parts of the world to Africa in order to learn from what was happening. So by the very fact that this level of civilization was actually in place, that shows you that there was a level of sophistication, writing, and many other technologies that were developed. That level of sophisticated civilization could not have gone into extinction without itself birthing in a better civilization that would grow as an offshoot from there. And this is just about the Egyptians. We've not talked about the other civilizations, well-intelligent and sophisticated civilizations that were existing in the sub-Saharan part of Africa, which were all languished and obliterated by the incursions of the Western civilization. Now, the question becomes, why was the West most developed the sophistication and the technology to be able to come and conquer the Africans? I don't know if you would permit me to go into that, but I think...
Please go. They are all very important here.
Yeah, so why was that? Why were they able to do that? So a lot of things came into play. If you look at the West, you find out that if you study the history of the world and the map of the world, you find out that, of course, the first set of humans, Homo sapiens, originated in Africa. And then Homo sapiens, being a species that was quite inquisitive, that was quite curious, I think curious is the better word, actually traveled and migrated from Africa to Europe and other parts of the world. Now, in Europe, the environment in Europe, geographical factors that included the kind of animals that were in place, the specific kind of plants that were in place, and the nature in which the communities, the different groups of Homo sapiens that settled in Europe, how they clustered around each other, actually precipitated the development of a civilization that is sophisticated enough to conquer and to dominate. So what do I mean by that? Let me make this clearer. For a civilization to actually become sophisticated, for a civilization to come into place, few things have to be in place. The first one is that they have to be able to develop their own food, and they have to be able to develop a technology that will enable them to conquer their environment. So they have to, first of all, be able to domesticate their own food, and then domesticate further more animals and develop tools that will allow them to control their environment. So now, this was something that really happened very fast for the Europeans, courtesy of the peculiarity, I would call it serendipitous peculiarity of their environment. In the European environment, in Eurasia, there were a collection of a cluster of plants, wild plants, that allowed the Europeans to easily domesticate them and develop food from there, which helped them to stop being nomads in time, to become a sedentary civilization, a sedentary group. For most parts of the world, even in Africans, most of them did not have that. So if you don't have a set of food or set of agricultural food and all of that, that you can actually domesticate, a set of plants that you can domesticate, you will continue to be nomads. And these are backed by historical facts, if you study these things. So they were able to domesticate these things. Some of them were apples, some of them were, a lot of other plants. So they were able to domesticate them in time. So after domesticated them, they were geographically favored to have a cluster of animals that was easier for them to domesticate. Example, the horses, example, dogs, and some other animals. Now, in Africa, some of these plants and these animals, domesticated animals, were actually imported. If you study the archaeological records, you will find out that, for example, horses were actually imported to Africa. They were actually pushed into Africa through the Europeans. What was more prevalent in Africa was zebra. And zebra is not an animal that can be domesticated. It cannot be domesticated because it's very irascible and unpredictable. So some of these were not able to be domesticated. Now, whilst in Europe, they had a cluster of these animals that was easy for them to develop, to domesticate. So once they domesticated these animals and these plants, they were able to become a sedentary culture. They developed a sedentary culture that allowed them to develop kingdoms, to develop empires, and from there developed a large civilization that was very powerful. Now, something also played into this. As they developed, their communities were always at war with each other because of the struggle with resources. And now, historical records have found out that any civilization, any part of the world where you have people always competing against each other, the level of the propensity for innovative technologies to be developed in those areas are much higher than in an environment where there is relatively peace and the communities are more sparsely dispersed from each other. In Africa, in most parts of sub-Saharan Africa, and in some other parts of Australia, and all of that. That was the case. So because of the close competition that was within these these communities, different communities and kingdoms in Europe witnessed, they were in constant war. If you check the history of the world, you find out that the people who are most warlike, people who are constantly in war and in competition, are people in Europe and in America. Of course, you see that even up to today. So you find out that because of that level of competition between them, they have the higher propensity of developing this technology, and getting really sophisticated by them. And other neighboring communities, amongst them, of course, you know that once technology develops, it is easier. Two ways a technology is developed by a society. When there's a need for that technology. So when there's a need in your environment that is caused by, let's say, war, heightened by competition between different groups. So there's a higher propensity for you to develop new technologies. And then the second is the technology can be imported. It can be actually transferred to your community. So that is why other neighboring European countries or European communities were able to assimilate these new technologies and then use them. So this was something that enabled the Europeans to become really sophisticated in their civilization and develop advanced tools and weapons and civilization that were more sophisticated than the Africans. And now, because that they were in an environment that's heightened their warlike spirit and their ability to conquer, they took that conquering mentality and that conquering zeal and zest that they have, and that adventurous zeal that they have, and they traveled, down the Atlantic and then came into Africa. And so of course, common sense tells you that if I have been fighting, if I am a boxer, if you're going to fight with me, and I'm a boxer, and I've been fighting for the past 10 years, and you have little or no experience in fighting, if I meet you in one-on-one combat, I am going to win you. The chances of me winning you is much higher. So the rest is history when they arrived in Africa.
This is a very important conversation. Now, we understand that civilization has been very advanced in Africa, and I was noting the European could even write home of as anything that could be regarded as history. And like you were saying, they managed to turn around and they kick out Africa from the position that they were. Of course, we can look at, for example, the known culture in central Nigeria, dating back up to 3,000 years. Those two, of course, very little also is said of that. This is where it becomes very, very annoying. I think we don't know a lot about African history, because if we know a lot about it, like you were saying, if you know your history, you will be able to have enough instrument to navigate in this complex world. Let me understand the question. Why have we not advanced with our tools, just like the European?
Yeah, so the answer is pretty clear. When the Europeans arrived, if I arrive in your area and then we engage in a combat and I win you, what actually happens is that I confiscate everything and you become a slave to me. So, and when you become a slave, I will practically erase your memory. I will erase your memory, and mark that is very important now, this conversation, because the memory here is the sheer collection of both the cultural heritage, and which is a collection of all the memes. Meme here is the collection of all the thoughts and all the experiences that people have articulated, and which is also encoded and built into their tradition, built into their language, built into their artifacts, built into their mode of dressing and every other thing. So what happens is that when I conquer you, I will erase your memories so that you don't get to remember any of it. Because quite literally, the competition, what you see in wars that happen, is essentially a fight or a struggle of ideas. One idea is trying to overcome another idea. One idea is trying to eat up another idea. And I call it memes. Memes here are simply those a psychological version of genes. So we have genes, which is the genetic memory that prescribes the way we humans, the instructions that lays out the genetic blueprints for us to operate in our world, for us to develop as biological beings. But memes actually lays out the psychological blueprints that we are going to develop on its own. And memes in and of themselves are intelligent organisms that want to keep feeding and developing themselves. One of the most powerful memes that we have in our world today is technology. Our technologies are memes. And these memes are reflected even in our tools. So your tools, your weapons of war are actually memes. They are ideas that have been built, that you have developed, that's built into your own system, that you developed, as that projects both your identity, who you are, your history, and actually where you're going. So look at the projection, the progression of the development of a simple weapon. I develop a spear, and I determine that this spear is what I'm going to use in a combat. When I use that spear on you and wound you in a combat, next time you will think through that experience, or your child, if you don't live to tell the story, will think through that experience and realize that, oh, if you have this spear, which means you can kill me, but if I develop some kind of a shield, if I take an iron and put it a handle, I can develop a shield that I can use to protect myself from that spear. So it becomes a higher notch. So the meme of the weapon, the weaponry has increased in its manifestation in our minds, and it's taking its own form. So it has increased. And from that shield, you say, okay, because you have developed shield, in the next combat, I have to develop a much grander and sophisticated spear or weapon that can break your shield. And so I develop an arrow or an arrow and a bow that can go farther. And from there, you go to guns. And from guns, you go to get onto nuclear weapons. So when I capture you and I take your weapons and I destroy them and I take them to my land and I erase them, what I'm doing is that I am actually erasing your memory and your memes. And your memes are closely tied with your genes. They are closely tied with your identity. That's who you are. So if I take away those things, if I take away your spears, take away your weapons, take away your clothes, take away your artifacts, take away everything that reminds you of where you're coming from, you no longer remember who you are. And I tell you, I am an extension of you. The only recollection that children have of history is actually their slave master. And of course, they have to adopt their slave master. And in that sense, you have successfully obliterated both the physical representation of their mental reality, their memories. So this is the reason why, this is what actually happened that made these weapons, we could not tell anything about them. We could not know anything about them. We didn't actually know how they looked like. Even some of them we have today are just a figment of imagination. It's almost like a figment of imagination, because almost all of these things have been destroyed. And then, so when these artifacts are destroyed and carried away and obliterated and replaced with their own artifacts, which are the guns that we have today and all of that, then it is actually an erosion of our own memories. And that is what happened to the Africans. And then because of that, it brings to the very question who we are. We don't even know what we are, what those things symbolize, and what our identity actually symbolizes. Because even your weapons symbolize a lot of things. If your father developed a specific weapon, that weapon carries within it the whole memory of what he went through in order to develop it. So when you get that weapon, you're actually, the symbolism is the memory. So when you get that weapon, you're inheriting both the physical entity, the physical material, that's the weapon, and the memory that your father has that was built into that weapon. So you're inheriting two things, your father's memory and the physical weapon itself. So when that weapon is taken away from you, you've not only lost the physical protection for yourself, that's the physical reality, you've also lost the memory. So you become, you are at a miss, you don't even know what to do. So it results to an identity crisis. And this happened across the board, in books, in culture, in language, you name it, anything at all. You're just using weapons here as a frame of reference.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. That is where we are today, in a state of confusion. Because some people have interviewed some historians where we are hard to really look at the issue of, look at who even came to Africa. These are really, in number, they were very few compared to who they wanted to dominate, because Africa is a very huge land. There are a lot of people in different parts of it. Very small countries in Europe came and they managed to dominate over them. Since then, we have never risen from the dust. So the question really is, to what extent is the African identity crisis problematic in today Africa?
Okay, so to make sense of that question, I'm going to start with even what you said. On a neurobiological level, very basic. For your brain, the way your brain functions is such that the things that you recognize around you, the book that you're looking at, your laptop, that laptop you're working with, your clothes, everything around you, the colors that you recognize, the lights that your eyes is able to recognize, the smell, the sense of smell that you're able to recognize, all of these things, they're practically memories stored in your neurons, stored at the very fabric of your being. So when you look at majority of what your mind does, let's say you look outside and then you look at a tree, your mind is not, your brain is not actually perceiving the tree as it is in itself. Your mind is making a calculated, sophisticated and calculated guess of what the photons, the signals, the light rays that are hitting your retina, and it's entering through the eyes, connecting with a lot of nerve signals through the occipital lobe at the back of your head, and it's hitting your hippocampus, which is the memory centers of your brain. And that part of the brain is interpreting the signals that it's getting from outside, and it's telling your brain, this is a tree. It's creating the picture of a tree. So, but this is not to say, even the colors that you see outside, this is basically, in reality, there's no true thing as red or black or any of those things. These are the way your brain is actually making sense of the world and creating a stable memory that will allow you to make a calculated guess and prediction about the world and maintain some level of regularity or consistency for you to be able to process and interpret the world. So when you look at that tree and your eyes are getting the signals, it is from the information in your brain that you're able to interpret that and make sense of what you're seeing. So basically the kind of things that your perceptual faculty, all the things that you're perceiving, your ability to make sense of it comes from the memory that you already have. Now, this thing is very, very important. This I'm explaining is really important because it's at the fabric and the core of our being. The hippocampus, that's the part of the brain that operates, that actually synthesizes memory, that plays a huge role in our memories. It plays a huge role in our ability to perceive the world, because your perception is usually tied to your memory, and then your ability to even remember things is usually tied to the hippocampus and the memory systems of your brain. Your ability to make projections into the future, to imagine, is tied to your memories. So a good example is a guy was visually impaired right from birth. And at the course of his life, I think during the age of 30s or so, his vision was actually restored. But even though his vision was actually restored at that age, he was still not able to see the world in the same sense that you and I see the world, because he had passed through, because growing up as a child, once you start seeing, the time you start perceiving what your mind is doing, your brain is doing, it is recording the signals, recording the light rays that are coming in, and it's actually creating memories from those things. After creating, it's going to make a map of the world and it's going to store them in your memory. So that even if you become blind tomorrow and later your sight is restored, you can still reach back to your memories and make sense of the world. Now, that guy was unable to see even after his vision was restored. And this connects really very well with the African scenario. I'm getting to that. He was unable to see after his vision was restored because he has no memory of what to see, no memories to perceive the world. So your senses are not just, it is not only your senses that do the work in the perception of the world. It's actually the memories, it's symbiotic relationship between the memories that are stored in your mind and the senses and the perceptions the senses are getting. Now, this goes to show you that without memories, you cannot perceive. Without memories, you cannot perceive. Perception is about information processing. So without memories, you cannot properly process information. Hold that there. When the prefrontal cortex of our mind develops, the prefrontal cortex part of our brain develops, we develop the capacity to be able to imagine, to make abstractions, and to be able to project into the future what we are going to create. Now, for us to make projections into the future, as you are there now, you're planning on the next guest of your podcast. You're planning on the things that you're going to do after now. Where are you doing that planning from? I'm asking. Obehi, where are you doing your planning from?
Okay, from the memory that I already have in my head, because I've
Thank you. Of how the world works, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to plan for the future from the memory that you already have. If you have a memory of that you have $5 million in your account and you want to start off a business, you're going to be planning from the memory of the $5 million that you have in your account. True or false?
Yeah, true.
If you don't have a memory of that $5 million, you're going to be planning from the memory of the nothing that you have. You'll be looking for how to borrow from people. True or false? True.
Yeah, true.
If your father, let's say, for example, that your father was a billionaire and then you are born, but you do not know that your father was a billionaire and had $5 billion in your account, and you want to plan your future, are you going to be planning from the memory of your father's $5 billion?
Not at all. I have no idea.
Thank you, no. So you cannot imagine a future without a better memory. So it is your memory that determines the future that you're going to imagine. If your memory is bad, you cannot imagine a better future. If your memory is bad, you cannot create a better future because it's the future borrows from what already is. Now, how does this affect the African? When the Europeans came and they understood that these people had their own level of civilization already in progress, they understood that in the same way that their competitors in Europe, in Eurasia, were actually threatening their own existence, that if they allow these fairly sophisticated, highly sophisticated civilization here to continue to progress and develop at its own rate, that it will get to a point that it will become so sophisticated that it will threaten them and then will go over the sea and conquer them. So they said, we better come back here and then dominate these people. They figured that out. And then in order to dominate them effectively, we have to ensure that they cannot create a future. Now, how best can you make a people not be able to create a future? It is that ensuring that they have nothing to create it from. So how do they do that? They ensure that in the colonial process, you find out that the French use the principle of assimilation. Excuse me. the French used assimilation, where the British used association. Am I correct?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that process, I think even the French, theirs was more brutal because they had to wipe out everything that you don't even realize that you're even an African in the first place. So both the principle of assimilation and association, if you look at its core level, the way it was actually designed, association and assimilation, it was designed to obliterate memory. It was designed to erase the memory of self-identity, who you are. Go to America, go to Europe, go to any part of the European country, you find out that the children, people can trace their generation down to the 7th generation. They'll tell you Fitzgerald the third, Fitzgerald the fourth. They will go back down into history. And if you go to their family homes, they have a huge collection and database of the historical records of their people. And even as a culture, they have a huge historical database of their culture. Queen Elizabeth, the Victorian times, Emperor of Rome, Nero, Augustus Caesar, all of that. That is a very huge reservoir of intellectual data, information to create and conquer the world. If you had that rich data, that huge amount of information, you can dominate and conquer any civilization at all. The farther your memory, the deeper your memory, the deeper the reservoirs of your memory, the more advanced your civilization. The deeper and the farther your memory, the more sophisticated your ability to imagine. So if you want to be able to imagine well how to create the future, you want to have a huge reservoir of memory to tap into. So how can the African match the European civilization without a huge database? But how bad is it? How bad is it? It is so bad that the language that which we are communicating today does not belong to us. And you don't know how far that goes in the destruction and the disenfranchisement and the disempowering level of that, the level of disempowerment that goes into that. Language is the most complete, the most comprehensive data set of cultural memory that a people can have. Because it is within language that you find culture, you find values, you find norms, you find everything. A lot of things are stored in language. Etiquette, a whole lot of things. Our forefathers used to transmit culture, traditions through oral language. Now, two ways you can store culture, two ways you can store memory. There is the intra storage, the one that you store within your body, within your own system. So let's say all your works, everywhere that you have a land, everywhere that you have properties, you have them in your mind, you have them in your memory, so you remember them. But this is the somatic version, the somatic storage of memory, so stored within the body. But there's the second. This is the extra somatic, the extra somatic, the extra sensual, where you store the memory in outside of you, in books, in your cultural artifacts, and all of that. So and it's not true that Africans did not have any form of literary or any written form of language and all of that. That's not true. It's only that it was obliterated, it was destroyed. So because it was destroyed, they now said you don't have any form of information that was stored anywhere, written anywhere. But Africans actually did have. We did have, but it was all of them were destroyed. So when you don't have any of that, there's nothing you can. Where are you going to create? So it's a very bleak situation that we are dealing with here. So the language that you're speaking is borrowed from another person. It's another person's culture. It's another because take for example, when you want to translate, when you want to transcribe a concept from your local language to another language, it loses meaning. You know that. It loses a lot of meaning. And in that process that is losing meaning, you are losing data. And from that data you're losing, you're being disempowered from creating a better future. Because your memories, your information, your data that is stored in your language and all of that is a collection of the experiences of your journey with reality based on your own environment. So when you are deprived of all of that, how can you function in your environment? Had it been the Europeans conquered us and took all of us and then put us in Europe, it would be much better for us, because the culture they handed over to us, the memory they handed over to us, was the collection of their own experiences of how to thrive in their own environment, not in ours. And every species develops an intelligence that allows it to be able to process its own environment. I define intelligence as the ability to interpret the world accurately and fast. That's what an intelligence is. So if you are existing in Africa, you need an intelligence that is unique to the African experience and reality to be able to process that. If you take a language, a culture, an educational system that has been cultivated and designed for the European environment, and you want to bring it into the African environment, you don't have the complete data set, the comprehensive data set that will allow you to decode and interpret your environment. And that is stored in your own language. So when that is taken away from you, how will you process your own environment? You will lack the intelligence to do that. I'm an intelligence researcher. My work is focused on helping people learn how to accurately interpret the world and process it. So if that is lost, that is why in my coaching sessions, I start from helping people to understand themselves. Even in the first place, you have to understand who you are. How do you process information? Who are you? How do you interpret the world? That is the first place. You cannot interpret the world from another person's perspective. You cannot live in Aba and you're offering solutions to solving agriculture, and then you are borrowing the template from someone that lives in Zamfara, that is almost desert, or Katsina, that is a dry land. Aba is, a green area. So,
all right, now, Mr. Ugo, let's look at culture. Let's look at it. Yes, I understand that language is an integral part of it, like you already correctly said. Now, in relation to the African identity crisis, which is evident in every way you want to look at it, what role does culture play in building up even that culture, building up even that identity itself? Because now it's not only just the language, but other things included in what is the culture.
Okay, yeah. So culture is, first of all, for you to understand the role that culture plays, you have to understand what culture is in the first place. At a very core level, culture is a habit of the mind, gotten from the scripts, the experiences that people, because it's a very rich data set of people's memory. So at an extensive, at a very large level, that its culture includes a lot of things, including the people's very language. The reason why I say language is the most comprehensive is because the language is the one it is the part of your culture that is actually encoded into you as a human being. It's the one that is put into you. The way you dress, the way all of those things, they are external. It is only your language that is internal. It is only when you speak that people will know where you're coming from. True or false?
Absolutely. Just by looking at your name, even just your name, I already know where you are coming from in the sense of Nigeria. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you. So that is language. That's the role that language plays. Now, culture, in its sense, borrows from that. It's an extension of that. So when you lose your language, it simply follows that even the other cultural elements that you have, the other cultural factors, other cultural realities that you have will gradually phase away by extension. And then look at it. In Africa today, the basic, go to every school in Nigeria. Let me speak from Nigeria that I am in. My nephew, my sister's children, and all of that. Basically, their mother tongue is English. In their schools, when we are growing up, we are prohibited from speaking English, from speaking Igbo. If you speak your local dialect, they call it vernacular, and then you're punished. You're made to pay fine for doing that. I'm sure you also witnessed that in your own school.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That is the most cruel form of this enfranchisement of human culture. That is the most cruel form of human dehumanization, because you are teaching, not only that you are depriving the person of their culture and their language, you're actually teaching them to hate it. You're actually teaching them that is inferior. And that is why the question of the identity crisis that the African is witnessing is one that is so bad that it hints on inferiority complex. That is why when we see the Europeans, we feel like we have seen gods. No, it's not that we have seen gods, it's not that we are taught to see them as gods. We are taught to see them as people who are advanced, because the time when you are in school, they will bring, first of all, they gave you their religion. And then in their religion, the iconographies and then the pictures and the images and symbols that we are used, all of these were data sets coming from the culture that are used to represent everything that is good, sublime, and divine, was Western portrayal of the culture. So Jesus looks white, and the God has white beard, and and is an Italian, and all of that. And then you go to church, the priest has to wear the clothes, the Western clothes, and then do the incense, which is non-African, and all of that. And this is a total lifelong brainwashing that destroys your brain. Because the thing that you now get to the point, and then they tell you that their saints, the real people who go to heaven are their own saints, that your forefathers are not saints. But in your own African culture, we have ancestors who are actually people who lived good lives. And so we dropped those ones aside, and then we adopted their own saints. And then they told us that our religion, which is a reflection of our ability to make sense of our world in our own way, they told us that our religion was actually paganism, and we are practicing fetishism. But you go to the Catholic Church, and what is fetishism? They tell you that an animism, that's what they call us. So they tell you that when you take when you pour libation, and then you eat from those libation, all of those things that you do, that's you actually practice animism. You're treating a lifeless object as something that has life.
A direct replication of what is happening inside the Catholic Church.
Thank you very much. And other parts of the world, and all other Christianity. So now, this is not necessarily an attack on one religion or the other. No. It's the question, because until you sit down to question your own identity, question where you're coming from, question the things that you're practicing, you will not be able to unscript your life and live an authentic life. You'll be living on other people's. Look at Nigeria. Nigeria is the second most religious country in the world, but it's also the most undeveloped and most corrupt. If religion is supposed to take people to heaven and make you become prosperous, why is it that China, which is one of the most atheistic countries in the world, is more successful than Nigeria? It tells you that is a sham. It's not religion. If you don't have a basic understanding of how the world works, which comes from your own investigation of your own reality within your own environment, embedded within your culture. If you don't have that, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to be able to create wealth. You're not going to be able to create your own reality. And this is what will deprive us. And you see that Africans, they spend the whole day, every Sunday, everybody goes to church, shut down everywhere. And then when you tell them to practice science and do investigation, research, and all of those things, it is alien to them because they don't understand the process. It is not something that was naturally coming from. If your forefather had a laboratory, having a lab was part of what your forefathers, like your father's shrine, if that was how you grew up, setting up research centers will not be an alien thing. It will not be something that government has to do a national project. You have to let's invest in research and science around D. No, it's not going to be that way. Because these things are alien to us. It's difficult to practice. You can't create from something you have no memory of. So
all right. Yeah.
What I actually do in my coaching process and what I do is to help people to create a memory from where they can imagine a better future. Help Africans do some kind of a self-authoring, an identity authoring, go through an identity authoring program where they are able to, at least, if you're not able to reconstruct your own past, start from where you are or from what you have, what the things that you hold there, from your own system, from your own body and your own system, from your own experiences. From that, create a memory for yourself. Create an identity that is unique to your circumstance and your situation and environment. And that will empower you to be able to imagine a better future and then create it.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. Now we have touched a really vital argument. This is one of the most important episodes that I've done. It's really very important. Now, when you were talking about the exhibition of our cultural inferiority in front of other people, some unlikely we don't even realize them, even though they're in front of us. No. One time I was asking a scholar from South Africa, why is it that when our president, of course I'm going to another level now, go to the United Nations to speak? Why I made the argument was because Buhari went to the United Nations to speak, and the English he spoke was not even proper English. Then I said, okay, Buhari know how to speak Hausa, or at least he should know how to speak one language in Nigeria perfectly. Because inside this language, he can even make joke. Why is it that we need to either speak French, speak English, or speak Portuguese when we want to speak at the international level? Whereas where people are coming from the Arabic world, say maybe Saudi Arabia, they don't pretend to speak English. The president of China, even though he might know English, he will never go to the United Nations and speak English. He said it's true of Russia. This is just a play evidence in front of us. At an international level, are we proud to speak of this language? Something this important to us as our identity? It can be really complex sometimes. But anyway, the question I want to ask you, Mr. Ugo, is what are the solutions? Because we are going to have to rebuild ourselves. I believe that the human being is really sophisticated as an animal in that he's able to rebuild. So I believe in that aspect of your coaching, even though I haven't really understand the details of it, that reauthoring of identity, that we can really recreate something. So looking at Africa as a group of people, how can we rebuild our identity? Because at least we are still alive. Many of us are still living in Africa, even though we are POW, I want to call us prisoners of war to the European. They do what they like, subliminally in most of the cases. How can we recover ourselves? What are the strategies? Please help me with this.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. And so because that's because it's at the core of what I've made actually my mission, especially here in Africa, helping the Africans to actually recreate their own identity, to author their own identity. And because that was actually what I did on my own. I had to question every other thing that I knew, my culture, my religion, everything. I had to question from the beginning to really understand who I am. So it starts at the very basic level. Who am I? Why am I here? It starts at a very basic level. To understand the self, understanding the self. When we talk about the self, people usually think that the self is, my name is Ugo Chukwu, and I am from Imo State, Nigeria, and I do this, or they attach their self with their work, their careers, and any other thing that they're doing. No, but those are actually the extensions of yourself. The things that yourself is using to manifest itself in the world. But at the very core level, what are the sources that have come together to create your sense of self? Part of the research that we are doing at my company, Next Earth, is an investigation into the memories that come to create individuals. So we go back into thousands and millions of years back to tap into the ancestral memories that actually come to create people's identity, people who they are on a genetic level. But successes in this area, we're still into the future. So whilst we are still developing the tools and the technologies to really arrive at this, they're starting from a very basic level. How do we solve this? The African has to understand that, yes, your identity has been robbed of you. What I usually tell people is, if you are born poor, or if you are born in an environment, and then you find out that there's something that you're lacking, it's not your fault that you're lacking that. It's not my fault that when I became conscious, I found out that my name that my parents gave me was Augustus. The baptismal name was Augustus. But when I became conscious of it, and I understood that wrapped with that name was an identity I could not align with. Identity that was not aligned with who I am. I had to change it and bring it back to my own local name. So it is to my own local name, which is Ugo Chukwu, which I could identify with, and which actually speaks to me at a very core level. It is from there that I can start creating who I am. So it is not your fault that what has happened in the past is not your fault, but it's your fault once you become aware of your condition. So awareness confers responsibility. So the process that I'm using, my evangelism starts with awareness. Telling the awareness, let's help the Africans to understand, to come to the awareness first, that you are suffering an identity crisis, even though you don't know it. Even though you're a Harvard professor and you're rich and you're making a lot of money and you're president of my country and you're speaking English in United Nations and all of that, even though you have all of that, you're suffering from an identity crisis that has prevented us from achieving collective progress. Because you look at the Africans, at an individual level, we're quite successful. Barack Obama, Mandela, Gojo Konjiwala, check out the Africans, Michael Jackson, all of those. On an individual level, they are quite successful. That's to tell you that there's nothing wrong with our genes. But on a collective level, they are not successful. So on a genetic level, which empowers you with the ability to thrive as a human being, you are intact. But on a cultural level, what you need to thrive on that level are means, which is the collection of your culture and all of that. So if what we are struggling with is a mimetic issue, is a mimetic disorder. So that is where we have problem. And that is why, as a collective, as a country, no African country in the world, whether it's in Africa continent or in the Caribbean or in the Americas, any part of the world, no African country or community in the world is successful, is even a first world country by the very standards of modern economics. So that tells you that there's some problem. So how is the solution? The solution starts from the self. It starts from the individual. My work is basically focused on advancing humanity by advancing individual consciousness. And in the African context, it is advancing the African spirit, the African identity, by advancing the consciousness of an African. So it begins at that level. That's the program that I do, identity authoring, is a process, is a coaching process that allows them African. So not only, it's not just engendering the African identity. No, you are on your own. You're going to create. First of all, you're going to understand where you're coming from. And you're going to create from your own experience, your own life, who you want to be, from your own experiences, from the rich heritage of your own culture. And there's a lot of cultural heritage. There's a lot of information and data that are still reserved in our culture, the ones that are still remaining. But you have to dig deeper. We have to now investigate to find out those things. And that's the process I take the individual to really understand, to delve deeper within you on an individual level, and also from around you, your own culture, your own environment. That allows you to start creating an identity for yourself, which you will share with your immediate family, because that is where it begins. An immediate family. I have a specific course that borders on memory itself, the wealth of memories, that teaches us that memory in and of itself is wealth. And so you learn how to create memories and then hand them over, how to transfer memories, and how to actually build up memories. It's a very fantastic course. A lot of people that I've had the time to coach, had the opportunity to coach, have attested to this. You go through that process, that you are able to create your own memories, conserve and preserve them, and then pass them on to your children. It's not just something that happens on an individual level, and it's not just a theoretical stuff that I do for that you go through just for you to rekindle your African identity, but it's actually that affects, because it affects your finances, affects your relationship, affects your work, it affects your emotions, every other aspect of your life. And people who have gone through this have recorded financial success, recorded emotional success in their relationship, in their careers, because you want to be an exemplar of success for your children and for your culture and for your people before they can then take you as an ideal, as an icon that should be looked upon. How many icons do we have in Africa that have done revolutionary things, that have done something that is worth changing? You know, we talk about the likes of Einstein, we talk about the likes of Tesla, we talk about the likes of, William Shakespeare. These are people, iconic figures, even Leonardo da Vinci. How many of those kind of people do we have in the African culture? The likes of Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. and all of those, quite recent. We are actually fighting for us to be able to create those things. We are fighting for identity. But for people who have actually pushed humanity forward, how many of them do we have in Africa? So this is a process that allows you as an individual to begin that process and to start creating it. And Africans are doing quite a lot in a different level. So with this consciousness that is coming, I hope that you listeners and you listening to this program, will be able to understand the importance of this in your life, and then know how to really integrate it, and then to start the journey. It is something that I went through on my own process, and I'm still going through the process. And I believe, and I hope, and I pray that we get to the level that we are able to make this knowledge reach as many people as possible, so that they can get the freedom that comes from this identity.
Absolutely.
I tell people, at the final level, that what Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. was able to achieve for the Africans was physical emancipation from slavery. But we are still lagging. It's the mental emancipation, which was what Bob Marley really cried of. We are still lacking that, and that is this identity crisis. What my work and my coaching career and all of that, what I'm doing is focused on, is take it to the next level, what Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. actually did, taking it to the next level, which is the mental emancipation. And it begins with the African understanding who he is, what he is, and who he is, because those are two different things. What he is, which talks about the essence of him, his ability to define himself and his origin and his culture. And then who he is, which is an interpretative process, an interpretation of his own identity and the meaning he's assigning to that person that he has defined. Because when you define what you are, who you are is assigning meaning to that person. which is an interpretative process. And that is where you release the memory that releases the instructions within your nervous system to begin to act in your business, in your finances, in your relationships, and in your career, that will now manifest that in your real life to turn into an authentic human being. So you want to do that process of the definition and interpretation. That is what I hope and I wish and I pray for every African.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. All right. It's really unfortunate that we will not be able to tap into your teaching, but I'm going to schedule another interview for that because I really want to look into what you are doing in those areas. But just now, we are going to have 2 more questions related to what we are discussing today because this is also very important and very deeply rooted. All right. Now, let's look back again to where we are coming from. Because now, I want to repeat the word again. We are prisoners of European war, so they use us the way they want after our encounter, and we have never been able to rise from the dust. Now, what do you think Africa needed to have done to save themselves from the European incursion?
Yeah, so basically, what I would say is, sometimes some things happen in life for reality to turn out in a different way, and then for change to really happen. So when we say, where did we go wrong? I cannot really, I would say that it's something that anchors on self-worth, the sense of self-worth. And what is self-worth? Self-worth is the collection of your capabilities. That's your intelligence in a concrete form. Your intelligence in a concrete form. If you are an engineer, if you go to school and then you study engineering, but you've not practiced engineering, if you're brought to a company where you have to practice engineering, you're not going to have a self-worth to actually prove that you are able to do this. You get the point? So you're going to be suffering from a low sense of self-worth. So I think probably because I was not in existence when these things happened. And even the little information that we have about how most of these things transpired, the wars transpired, and eventually we lost our own civilization. Partially, we lost it. The information we have, most of them were what the Europeans actually narrated, and others were from archaeological facts that we get. But I think majority of what happened, like I told you in the early part, was that these people were more sophisticated in their civilization because they have really advanced their civilization because of their unique circumstance, which is not something, so it's more of a question of the luck, of evolutionary luck. You find yourself in an environment that empowers you with more capabilities to be able to fight wars, win them, develop better tools, and then to come and then to conquer others. Because you notice that even when Christianity was being preached in Africa and in most African countries, it was preached with also the gun. You get the point? It was also preached with the gun because it wasn't like people were just, of course, Muslim came with crusade into Africa. So you had to agree, you had to believe or you are killed. The same was also in some parts with Christianity. You had to believe or you were killed. So it was a question of a disempowerment on 2 levels: mental disempowerment and physical disempowerment, which comes from a low self-worth. The mental disempowerment is a more sophisticated ideological system, which came from the ability to craft a message in a way, is what I call, it's part of the process that I go with some of my students in a coaching session on an individual level. We develop what we call a meta idea. A meta idea is a master idea that you develop. It's what I help them to go through so that they're able to develop that, to help them to go through life, to be able to solve problems. And it actually makes them, it literally makes you invincible. So a meta idea is the ability to develop a master idea that is able to decode and override any disempowering idea that you have, that was gonna assail you in the course of your work or your life. You get a point? It's what I call a meta idea. So I think it's a sophisticated idea that can decode another idea and override it. Now it doesn't matter whether the idea that it is decoding and overriding is the same with it. It's just that it's more sophisticated in its ability to do that. So I think on a mental level, this was what the Europeans had. Because of the competition that has been going on, they have become so sophisticated in their idea. They have developed a very rich, like I told you, a very rich data sets of information about religion, culture. So they call it their own way they organize their society, democracy, quite sophisticated in its sense. And also the religion, Christianity and Islam, quite also sophisticated in its own right. Now, what they were able to do was to bring it to Africa, and we were able to use it to decode and override our own system. Even though we are also practicing those kind of things, the same belief structure was in place with what they brought. If you decode the Christian belief structure and decode the African traditional religion, its belief structure, you find out that to a large extent, the trappings are almost the same. You get the point? In Igbo, they have the big god. It's called Chukwu, the big god. And I know in your place also, they have something like that. And then they have the smaller gods. In the Christian religion, which is, though largely monotheistic, you also have other, you have the sense, you have other distance, you have the concept of the Trinity. All of these things, you see them in different cultural systems and in different religions. But what they were able to do was, because they had the other aspect, which was also the guns and the also sophisticated way to organize the society. Of course, they talk about democracy and republicanism. If you come down to Nigeria, the Igbos were practicing a system of government. You understand? An egalitarian system of government. But they were able to develop a meta idea that they were able to use to decode and override ours. So on an ideological level, we were able to do that. This was where we got it wrong. Not being able to recognize that this thing that they were bringing to us was almost the same thing, almost the same that we're practicing, and which none of them was more sophisticated. That theirs were no more effective than ours. That was on the one side. Now, notice something that happened when this religion or cultural system, when they tried teaching it, and in parts of African culture or African society where they were resisted, where people actually realized this on an ideological level and resisted it, what did they resort to? They resorted to violence, to weapons, using their guns. And in that aspect, they had actually developed advanced weapons because of their long usage, because of where they're coming from, because of they have been able to develop more sophisticated weapons than us, than our forefathers, not us now, than our forefathers. So they were able to use it to override. So in places where if they show you the Bible and teach you and you don't become docile, they use the gun on you, they use force on you, and then you have to agree, and they take you into slavery. So in retrospect, what are we going to do so that these things don't repeat itself? Because that's the point. It begins with developing an idea that is sophisticated enough that it can decode and override whatever idea, any other idea that anybody is bringing to you. When societies are overrun and conquered is when their ideological philosophy actually fails. That is when it actually happens. So which means if a subsistent idea is able to decode and override yours, then automatically you'll be conquered. If they will even use weapons to conquer you and all of that. So that is what I try to help the individual to do on an individual level, to develop that sophisticated, and it comes from your own identity. So it becomes from you decoding who you are. Because if it's built on the foundation of who you are, and you use that to create an identity for yourself, then it becomes very difficult for another person to come and uproot it and destroy it and neutralize it. It becomes very difficult.
Thank you so much. Now, what will be your last statement to conclude the conversation? I cannot even thank you enough. This is a full lecture.
All right. In conclusion, what I would say is time is running out. The first industrial revolution has happened. The second industrial revolution happened. Third industrial revolution happened. You're actually in the third industrial revolution. And with the level of emerging technologies that are coming into place, like I told you, if you're going to develop a future, if you're going to imagine a future, better future, you have to be able to create it from a huge reservoir of a data set of memories. Now, Africans, we have enough memories. It's just that we are unaware of it. Just like that, your father that has 5 billion in his account and real estate investments and all of that. It's just that you are unaware of this, what your father already has. So the journey I take people on is to help them to uncover what your father left behind for you. And then from there, you create your own identity from who you are, from what you're seeing around you now, from your own environment now. You create that. So first of all, you discover that, and then you create yours, and then you use it to imagine a better future. So the emerging technologies that are coming in board, that are coming in place, they are so sophisticated that if we are unable to latch on to this fourth industrial revolution that is happening and create the technologies that actually reflect our own names and our identity, who we are, because we need to create a technology that reflects who we are. The phones and the technologies that we're using today is a reflection of the West. That is why when you look at your computer, it speaks American English. When you type it, speaks American English, the Roman numerals, the keyboard, everything is designed in their own image and likeness. We have to define a technology that actually reflects us. And the world we're entering into is a world that is going to be run by the superiority of ideas and technology. Ideas manifested in technology. The person who has the most sophisticated technology will rule. This time around, in the first industrial revolution and the second industrial revolution and the third industrial revolution that happened, the people who lost out, who were not able to develop their own technologies, their own sophisticated technology, lost out, and they became the slaves. In the second and the third industrial revolution, they actually became the factory workers. In the fourth industrial revolution, people who miss out, they're not going to become the slaves. They're not going to become the workers. They will go into extinction. Because at that time, the level of technology that will be in place will be so advanced and sophisticated that the technology will be automated and will become self-conscious on its own and will be able to run its own system that it will not need the people who are unable to develop theirs. So my program is a call to help upgrade human intelligence, starting from the Africans, so that we're able to develop the kind of a technology that suits our own identity, so that we can be able to create the future that we want. We can be able to imagine it and then create it. So going forward, this is a matter of life and death. We are fast going into extinction. I saw a research some time ago that predicted that I think the Igbo language and most local dialects in Nigeria will go into extinction. I think it was 2030 or 25. Now, those estimates might not be really realistic, within that time frame. But from the rate of what is happening now, with the way my sister's children are speaking English, and their mother tongue, they don't even know how to speak it. Their children and their children's children will be reading Igbo and other local languages, like the dead languages like Latin, in books. And with that obliteration comes a huge obliteration of their identity. So if a meme overrides another meme, what happens is that the people who come up, even though they might have black skin, but they will be actually Europeans. They'll be carriers of the philosophy and the ideologies of the European. And they're not going to be anything like the African. So which means the African will eventually go into extinction. We don't want this. So you have a responsibility as an individual to begin the process of this identity authoring, to start authoring your own identity, because it's from your own identity that your children are going to create their own identity and be able to imagine and create a better future. So we're getting into a time and an age where technology is people who have the most superior ideas will create the most superior technologies. And my work is focused on helping Africans to create an identity that allow them to be able to develop ideas that will develop their own technologies going forward. So it's a call to arms, it's a call, not maybe violent arms, but Battle of ideas, battle of identity is a core, is a sacred mission, is a holy war that we have to engage in. You have to save yourself by understanding yourself.
Thank you so much. This is really very powerful. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewanfo. Thank you so much for listening and talk to you in the next episode.